50 years ago, President Lyndon Johnson signed into law the National Historic Preservation Act, making a commitment to protect our environment and our national cultural heritage. In California, this act would give archaeologists a chance to study thousands of sites prior to large-scale construction. And what they discovered would have a profound effect on understanding the state's prehistoric past.
Hi, I'm Amy Gilreath, an archaeologist with Far Western who's been working in California for the last 30 years or so. And with me today, I've got a panel of 3 other career archaeologists in California. Cassandra Hinscher, an archaeologist from the Karuk tribe up in northwestern California. Bill Hildebrandt, another senior researcher at Far Western. And Tom Orger is next to me, who has scientific expertise in obsidian hydration analysis. We're going to talk a little bit today about some really remarkable developments and discoveries in California prehistory since the passage of the National Historic Preservation Act some 50 years ago. And to get us started, we've chosen some film clips from a movie that was made in 2003 for PBS called The Obsidian Trail. So let's start with that first clip.
Few people are accustomed to thinking about California ever having had a Stone Age. But up until the time that European miners and other settlers began flooding into the area about 150 years ago, much of the state was inhabited by very sophisticated Stone Age people who'd lived here and wrested a living from the land for 10,000 years or more.
Unlike the miners who sought gold for the easy riches it would bring them, the native cultures of this region sought a different rock, precious to them for their very survival.
Obsidian, black glass. Among Native American cultures, there's no more important resource that you could have. It was sharper than bone, it was sharper than stone, it was rare. It would be even sharper than the iron tools brought later by the miners.
And nowhere did Native Americans use obsidian more extensively, trade it more prodigiously, mine it more unceasingly for thousands of years than in one hidden, almost impenetrable valley in eastern California.
Owens Valley, it seems almost frozen in time. If you walk the valley floor and pay attention to the ground, you'll notice that it's littered with obsidian arrows and chips. Those chips are from ancient travelers making their own tools. As an archaeologist interested in California's prehistory, those obsidian chips literally are our trail markers to the past.
So obsidian's a pathway to the past, and we have some obsidian here in front of us, and it's really shiny and black. If I wanted some obsidian, where could I go to get some?
Well, actually, it's really quite rare across North America, and we're lucky here in California because it has some of the highest concentration of the material in the world. It occurs in our vast volcanic landscapes, most of which are on the east slope of the Sierra Nevada, but there's also many up by Mount Shasta in the north part of the state, and the third part of this triangle is near Napa Glass Mountain and the hot springs that are around there. In fact, the obsidian from Napa Glass Mountain is some of the best in the world. It comes raw like this at the quarries, but then the flint knappers or stone workers will break it down into a variety of artifacts, these roughouts, and then ultimately finished tools that can be used for a variety of purposes.
Well, and its prevalence to around the state and its importance to tribes was not just as tools, but also as ceremonial items. In my tribe's area, they used obsidian to make long blades, maybe 2 feet long. And it also had a spiritual medicinal value.
Well, with the passage of the Historic Preservation Act, archaeologists are now getting out in the field in a lot more places than we used to, and we're seeing that obsidian is abundant across the landscape. And some sites that we've worked on, we find on the order of 30,000 flakes in a cubic meter of soil. And those flakes allow us to understand, in particular, the time at which the artifacts were being made.
Okay, so now maybe we should see the next clip that really talks about the incredible amount of information that's coded into every single obsidian flake and how scientists get that information out of analysis.
Obsidian is a natural glass that absorbs moisture from the atmosphere. Even an arid environment such as the Owens Valley has sufficient moisture in the air that the process can take place. The water molecules work their way from the surface of the obsidian into the specimen and form what we call a hydration band. And this whole process is one that we call the hydration process. Over time, the hydration band enlarges as more moisture is absorbed, and the hydration band then becomes thicker. In order to understand the age of an artifact, we have to take a small sample out, such as what we've done here with this Elko-eared point. From that sample, we can create a thin section and see the hydration band and measure its thickness to actually calculate the age when this artifact was manufactured. On the microscope, we have the thin section that shows the hydration band from the Elko point. The measurement on this specimen is 5 microns. By the way, a micron is 1/1000th of a millimeter. The measurement from this specimen tells us that this artifact was made roughly 4,000 years ago. Another specimen that we have here is a desert side notch point. It has a measurement of 2.3 microns, which tells us that it's much younger and really is about 300 years old.
Obsidian hydration testing gave archaeologists a sense of when in time each arrow had been made. Another form of analysis that came of age at the same time would show exactly where even the tiniest flake of obsidian had come from.
Out in the field, it's pretty hard to distinguish one piece of obsidian from another. That's because obsidian is basically black glassy rock. But each obsidian flow has a unique geochemical fingerprint. In the laboratory, we can use a technique called X-ray fluorescence spectrometry to determine the trace element composition of obsidian. So when we find an obsidian artifact in the field, we can use XRF to link it to its volcanic source.
Potassium, we know we have sodium. There's a secondary iron peak.
Yeah.
So this obsidian really is a window into the past. And with some 50 years of archaeology and fast development in California, we must have these really big databases that we've developed. So what are some major patterns that we've learned about California's prehistory?
Well, one of the major things we've learned is that the deep history is far from static. There's many, many changes that took place. And one of the things that obsidian is really conducive to learning is how people's mobility patterns and the sizes of their territories changed over time. 10,000 years ago, in the Owens Valley area on the east side of the Sierra, people were able to travel 200 to 300 miles in a single year because it was wide open, not too many people around. And we can see that by how they visited the different obsidian quarries along the way. But then through time, as more people moved in and populations began packing in, their territories got smaller, and we no longer see those faraway sources represented. In fact, their territories get quite small. In some places, they might only travel 30 miles to the nearest obsidian quarry.
So the obsidian types let us see these different patterns, but why do we think those different patterns really developed? Why did people's territoriality sort of escalate?
Well, another unique thing about California is that the environment was very rich, and the Indian people that lived here learned how to make the best possible uses of the resources that were available through burning and developing new kinds of technologies like fish weirs and basketry technologies for processing small seeds. And so they became really, really high density, and you just couldn't go wherever you wanted eventually because there was different territories and couldn't necessarily get everything you used to be able to get or what you wanted.
Well, and that population density would have forced a lot more trade, a lot more interaction between tribes to get what they need. One tribe wouldn't have everything it needed in its small territory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we certainly see that in the North Coast ranges in the area north of San Francisco Bay, where Mapp obsidian originates, and the folks there who controlled the source as their land was impacted by newcomers coming in, their land shrunk, but they always maintained the source in the center of their territory. And that obsidian then was able to be traded out and exchanged to other groups from that particular group.
Well, in these changing territory boundaries that you're talking about and the information from the obsidian support something that tribes are really advocating for, and that's the idea that tribal boundaries have always fluctuated. They've always moved around as people moved, as people blend in with other tribes, and it's not the way that the early anthropologists in California documented it. They made a map that had language and ancestral boundaries on it, but those boundaries were a point in time. So tribes have been pushing back against that static concept, and the obsidian data really supports that, how fluid it was, how dynamic it was.
So those are all some really great examples of how much we've learned for the last several decades. I think I'd be remiss, though, if I didn't ask the question, what has the National Preservation Act done in terms of the kinds of collaborations or interactions between Native American communities and archaeologists and other communities who are concerned about what gets preserved or studied in their neighborhoods? So now might be a good time to take a look at this third clip that we have to learn some different perspectives on that.
There's a specific time where I was on a rock and there was a bunch of flakes below the rock, so you can just tell that somebody was up on this rock overlooking this valley just making a point. There was just thousands of flakes below, and it was cool to understand that maybe to think what he was thinking or she was thinking at the time, and just to try and put yourself in their shoes and just imagine how it would be to be living back then and living in that lifestyle.
You're on an archaeological site, and to everybody there, it's kind of like, interesting. It's something new. It's something, that can spark the imagination. And then you look at it, the other way, to where it's something that connects you and everybody there to the past. It's something that, connects everybody spiritually, whether you're, Christian or Muslim or anything else. You're in a spot where prayers were said. You're in a spot where families gathered. You're in a spot where they passed down the traditions to that next generation over a campfire.
I believe archaeology is important so we know where we've been and where we need to go. Why we've survived, what caused survival, what didn't survive, how we existed and where we need to exist.
That film segment was a great demonstration how the National Historic Preservation Act has changed one thing, and that's bringing Indians into doing archaeology really on a day-to-day basis. And there was nothing like that in the 70s when I first came into archaeology as a graduate student.
Exactly. The type of interaction you saw in that film clip didn't always exist. It wasn't always that way here in California. Before the National Historic Preservation Act, tribal people got involved in archaeology by forcing themselves onto sites, by armed protest. They wanted to be there and be a part of what was happening. And now with the NHPA, the collaboration has changed, and the consultation is required with tribes under the National Historic Preservation Act, but even that isn't quite enough. I still consider these to be transitional times. So tribes are moving forward with the NHPA, tribes are asking for more. They're demanding a bigger role in the process.
Well, I think that extends also to just sort of curation and museums, changes that have developed over the last decades that relate to that.
Yeah, exactly. One of the trends that I'm really happy to see is that tribes are now starting to build their own institutions and museums to curate artifacts, so that those artifacts that are excavated by archaeologists and through CRM are going home to the tribes. And archaeologists usually can still have access, but the tribe is housing them, the tribe is caring for them in the way that they want, and taking over that responsibility. And that's something I really like to see, and I really want to see more of that in the future of the National Historic Preservation Act.
Yeah, that'd be good.
There are a lot of questions that remain unsolved in Owens Valley. What the science has revealed is a history of movement, from the deep tectonic movement of the continents to the wide migrations of people across a vast expanse of the West, to the particular movement of small pieces of precious glass in the hands of those who worked and used it.
For those of us lucky enough to work in this part of the world, obsidian provides a detailed window onto the past. By employing obsidian hydration and the chemical sourcing or fingerprinting of glass, we're able to track the movement of individual pieces of obsidian or artifacts through time and across space, and by doing that to track the movement and behavior of prehistoric people in greater detail than is possible almost anywhere else on Earth.